In the shadow of the Great Hunger, more than 1 million Irish men, women, and children fled their homeland, not for dreams of riches, but for a chance to survive. They crossed the Atlantic in coffin ships, so named because for many they became floating tombs, and arrived on the shores of Boston weak, broken, and desperate. But not all who left Ireland made it to safety. Some perished before ever setting foot on American soil. Others arrived only to meet cruelty, disease, or isolation in a land that did not welcome them. Their stories were buried under layers of shame, silence, and time. But in the salt-stained winds off the Massachusetts coast, their voices are still heard. This is the story of Deer Island, a bleak strip of land in Boston Harbour, once home to quarantine hospitals, almshouses, and mass graves, a place where thousands of Irish immigrants spent their final days and where their spirits are said to remain. What follows is not just a ghost story, it is a reckoning with a dark chapter of history, a tale of suffering, injustice, and the souls that never found rest. Because some ghosts do not haunt castles or cottages, some follow the tide. The wind off Boston Harbour cut like a knife, carrying with it the scent of salt and something older, something forgotten. To most, Deer Island was just another part of the city's working class past, but to those who knew the stories, the real stories, it was hallowed ground, haunted ground. It began, as many of these tales do, with a ship. They called it Black 47, the worst year of Ireland's Great Famine. Across the western coast, families were starving, the land gone to rot, the workhouses overflowing. The British Empire turned its back, and the people turned to the sea. Coffin ships, they called them, not because they carried the dead, though many died aboard, but because boarding one was nearly a death sentence in itself. One such ship, the Bridget Hope, left Galway that spring. On board were over 300 Irish souls, farmers, widows, children with hollow eyes. Among them was a 12-year-old girl named Nora O'Rourke, travelling with her mother and baby brother. Her father had died digging the relief roads. They buried him with stones and whispered prayers. The journey took 6 weeks. Nora watched men die of fever. She watched a woman go mad and leap into the sea. She held her baby brother as he turned blue and stiff in the night. By the time they reached Boston Harbour, 53 passengers were dead. But Nora was alive, or at least that's what the passenger ledger said. In 1847, the city of Boston faced a crisis. The influx of Irish immigrants, many sick with typhus, overwhelmed the hospitals. Officials decided to quarantine the newest arrivals on a remote peninsula in Boston Harbour, Deer Island. They built a wooden quarantine station there, barracks, a hospital, and a burial ground for those who wouldn't make it. Hundreds of Irish were left to rot in those freezing, damp conditions. Entire families were separated, records lost, names misspelled or erased entirely. Nora and her mother were among them. No records exist of what happened in the weeks that followed, but an anonymous city official noted this in a diary. The girl in the brown shawl wanders at night. She sings in a strange tongue. I saw her kneeling at the edge of the cliff, hands cupped like she was catching stars. A week later, Nora O'Rourke was added to the death register of Boston, marked as deceased, exposure, and fever. But her grave was never found. There were rumours even then that some of the children, especially those who died alone, never moved on, that the sorrow of losing everything, of being left in a strange land to die, could anchor a soul to the place of its final suffering. In the decades that followed, Deer Island changed. The quarantine buildings were demolished, replaced by water treatment facilities and public trails. But the dead were still there. The field where the Irish were buried remained unmarked for over a century. The first confirmed haunting came in the winter of 1863. A group of Union soldiers stationed at nearby Fort Warren were training on the peninsula. One night, Private Thomas Connolly, himself the son of Irish immigrants, vanished during patrol. He was found 2 days later, curled at the base of an oak tree, frostbitten and muttering in a dialect no one recognised. When asked what happened, he said only, "She followed me from the sea. She wanted her brother." Later, he hung himself in the barracks. The incident was quietly buried by military officials, but rumours spread of a girl in a shawl, barefoot in the snow, seen walking the shoreline of Deer Island, calling out names in a voice too old for her young face. A lighthouse keeper in 1909 claimed he saw the same girl walking toward the edge of the peninsula at dawn. He said she vanished into the wind, not fading or running, but simply dissolving like smoke. In the 1930s, a fisherman swore he found a child's bonnet tangled in his nets just offshore. It was hand-stitched, still damp, with the initials NOR stitched in the lining. In 1984, a group of high school kids dared each other to sleep overnight on the southern cliffs. One girl, Siobhan McGrath, never spoke again. Her brother said she'd walked off into the trees and was gone for an hour. When she came back, she was barefoot, her eyes bloodshot, and she kept whispering, "She says the water is too loud." She spent the rest of her life in a care home in Dorchester. Fast forward to the present. Maggie Kelleher, a 30-year-old Boston native, ran a local ghost tour business. She had Irish roots, grandparents from Mayo, and loved nothing more than chasing legends. She'd heard the stories of Deer Island, of course. Everyone had. But it wasn't until 2022 that she decided to investigate for herself. There'd been a series of 911 calls from hikers on the island's walking trail. Reports of hearing a child's voice calling "Mama," or spotting a girl with long dark hair vanishing into the fog. Maggie grabbed her recorder, a thermal camera, and a portable EMF reader. She boarded the ferry on a brisk October morning, headed alone to Deer Island. It was colder than she expected. The path was lined with wind-twisted trees and rusted fencing. The old quarantine station was long gone, but the burial ground, an unmarked field near the southern cliffs, remained. Maggie walked the perimeter, recording audio. At first, just wind and gulls, but then a faint humming, a child's voice. She stopped, hit play. "Welcome home, my darling." It was an old lullaby, one her grandmother used to sing, but the voice was wrong, too slow, too broken, as if it were coming from underwater. Her EMF reader spiked. She turned. Standing 30 feet away was a girl in a mud-caked dress, barefoot, staring directly at her. Maggie gasped, but didn't move. She raised her camera. Click! When she looked again, the girl was gone. She reviewed the footage on the ferry back. Nothing, just empty woods. But when she examined the audio, she heard something else. Not the girl's voice this time, but her own, whispering in a tone she didn't remember recording. "I never left." Maggie's story went viral among local paranormal forums. A team from the Boston Paranormal Society arranged an overnight investigation. They camped on Deer Island for 3 nights in late November. On the second night, at 3:13 a.m, every motion sensor lit up. Cameras captured what appeared to be wet footprints leading across a dry patch of concrete, child-sized bare feet. One member, Sean, a skeptic, followed the tracks with a thermal camera. He made it 20 feet before he dropped the device and screamed. Later, when pressed, he said, "I saw myself, but I was dead. I was lying in a pit, and she was kneeling over me whispering something. She said she remembered Galway. I've never been to Galway." Sean quit the group 2 days later. The breakthrough came when Maggie was contacted by a librarian in Dorchester. A set of journals had been donated by the family of Father Michael O'Connell, a priest who had served at the Deer Island quarantine in 1847. One entry read, "There is a girl who does not die. She stands by the graves. I have seen her 7 times. Each time she looks more drowned. I buried her once, I think. But she came back whispering the names of those we lost at sea. I fear she is a gate." Another entry simply read, "I tried to bless the ground. The wind howled in protest. The earth spat back the holy water." In January 2023, Maggie returned for one final visit, this time not alone. She brought a psychic named Erin, a woman known for her work with Boston's Historical Society. Erin stood on the southern cliffs and closed her eyes. Then she began to speak, but not in her own voice. Her tone dropped, her posture shifted, and her words came slowly, almost dragged out. I crossed the sea in a box of bones. My brother died in my arms. They burned our names. But I remember. We remember. We are still cold. We are still here. After Maggie's recordings were made public, the city erected a new plaque on Deer Island, in memory of the Irish who died here in 1847. May their souls rest and their stories be told. But stories continued to emerge. A jogger heard sobbing near the old burial field, turned to see a dozen figures standing just beyond the fog, unmoving. A local fisherman swore he saw a girl walking on the water, heading for Boston's shore. And every St. Patrick's Day, someone leaves a single brown shawl tied to the gatepost near the old road. No one ever sees who leaves it. What if Nora O'Rourke never made it across the Atlantic as a living girl? What if she died mid-journey, and some part of her soul, filled with pain, confusion, and ancient grief, refused to stay behind? What if she wasn't the only one? Maybe Deer Island is more than a haunted place. Maybe it's a breach, a place where the sorrow of famine, of loss, and exile still echoes. And maybe the ghosts who followed were never looking to harm anyone. Maybe they just want to be remembered,